Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, gamer boys and girls, welcome back to the pod. So the new choice have arrived, with 9 titles, although it is really 8 in reality. And it was off to a rocky start. Both me and V had problems initially, that luckily got solved. So let's see what the February 2022 bundle can offer us.
Released in August 2021, Black Book is one of those unlucky entries that got lost in one of the dark corners of the market, for no real reason really. I've actually done a full review based on a full playthrough back then. I'll link it in the top corner and the description. If you're interested in a thorough review, I heavily suggest you check that video out. In the meantime, the Too Long Didn't Listen version is as follows. BB is a card battler / RPG set in a Slavic mythology based environment. The card slinging aspect is fun, and the RPG part is satisfactory as well. Neither of these would dominate their own category, but they elevate each other and the result is good. This is then further boosted by a minor amount of point and clickage, an in-game alternative card-based minigame. Both of these spice the basic concept in a positive manner as well. The entire Slavic aspect is super interesting and carries the title on its back big time. As for the cons, the in-game visuals are lackluster. Despite the 2D renderings of the characters being amazing, the actual 3D visualization is just poor. Voiceovers are hit and miss, especially when you add that they can often differ from the subtitles shown at the same time. A few quality of life features would be welcome, mostly with regards to the interface, but nothing too bad here. I'd say most of my concerns revolve around the presentation rather than the actual gameplay. Now, if any of this sounds at all interesting, I'd once again suggest you check out the full review and then download Black Book. Despite its few issues, I have fond memories of playing it to date.
Before We Leave stands as an interesting title, capable of mixing different mechanics with each other. First of all, exploration, which can be carried out both by land, sea or by space. The underlying context is in itself rather trivial. We find ourselves in a world where human civilization is in ruins and is forced to hide practically underground in order to survive. The fascinating aspect is given by the progression that we will experience from the point of view of the human race. Starting as a small community, we will expand to other islands with all the dangers that this entails. In terms of gameplay, a fundamental aspect of the game is the management of space and roads, which will constitute a decisive part of our settlements. We will be allowed to build only on the squares connected to the roads. Creating an efficient network of the latter will provide to be essential, not to mention mandatory. By making our civilization grow and prosper, we will gradually be able to access new technologies. We will start by building on land, but over time we will literally change the planet. Exploration will have its advantages, as it will allow us to discover new technologies that will allow us to further evolve our civilization. It's also important to keep the morale high, since their performance in work will depend on their mood, but managing this aspect and their performance will sometimes be frustrating, as it varies the resource income and can slow down everything, even gameplay. Also, the space to build is far too limited. Consequently, the pace of the game will be broken by the need to better manage what's available. As per tradition in the genre of management and city builders, we will have to be able to keep an eye on a vast empire. Before we leave, we'll particularly test our management skills. In addition to being able to create shipping routes to transport materials between islands and planets, it will be possible to collect materials from the ancients. By doing so, we will get points to invest in technology trees, which will be unlocked by exploring the universe. In general, the level of challenge will increase gradually and in proportion to the progress of the game. With Before We Leave, the Balancing Monkey Game Studio offers us a really interesting city builder that will delight any fan of the genre. So if you like what you see, I suggest picking it. It's a very safe choice.
The third installment of the Borderlands series, and of course the DLC we also get in the bundle, is undeniably the leading title this time around. The first-person looter-shooter series originally had its cel-shaded graphics and its banger intro music to thank for its fame, but admittedly, the tongue-in-cheek humor and the general feel of playing Diablo in a first-person sci-fi environment also added to the enjoyment. Literally a decade has passed between the release of the first and the third entries, and 3 hours and then some into checking the latter, I'm just sitting here wondering what's supposed to be the reason to play this. If you're unfamiliar with the series, in a nutshell, you'll pick one of the 4 available classes, these differ from entry to entry, and hop into a semi-open world looter. There's always going to be a main questline to follow to advance the story, and beyond that, a bundle of time sink activities to jump into. On the one hand, side quests serve as both busy work, and on the other, a reason for you to farm up a bit should you fall behind with regards to your power level. They also introduce mildly interesting characters, except when it comes to Claptrap, the poster character of the series since forever. There's obviously a reason behind this, I'm sure quite a big chunk of the fans love him, but if you ask me, he's just flat out obnoxious and therefore a waste of a perfectly fine character slot. Further to questing, you're also invited to explore and collect, for example different items for Claptrap, points of interest in connection to previous episodes' characters, or these legendary beasts that you can kill for loot. This leads us on to the main focus of Borderlands, the guns, and the grenades, oh and the armor. The metric fucktons of all of these. Pretty much whomever you murder will drop loot. No matter where you look, you'll see rows and rows of lootable chests, cabinets and toilets. All of these will vomit out ammo and weapons for you to look through in hopes of finding higher numbers than you've seen before, better rarity, or just different elemental effects to counter enemies you meet. There's a massive crowd out there that appreciates this. For me, it's just way too much. Spending more time looting than I've previously spent fighting is something I'm not really interested in. As a side note, I'm also not interested in the sort of game design that makes you fight through a gauntlet, beat up a boss, then drops you a quest item that sends you back to the start through a bunch of respawned enemies, just to make you go through the entire gauntlet all over again. For me, Borderlands 3 was an exceptionally boring experience. An average at best beginning of a story, gunplay with absolutely no weight behind it, character progression comprised of unlocking passive power-ups, and pretty much that's it. If you're into looters, or you're a fan of the series, you might come to a different conclusion than me. Otherwise, there are way better titles than this in this month's bundle.
Oh man, this game is something. Ladies and gentlemen, my top pick for this month. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, let's dissect this gem. In the opening bars of Everhood, an unspecified entity asks us if we are willing to give up our humanity to become immortal. Whatever our answer will be, we will find ourselves in the body of Red, a wooden doll sadistically deprived of an arm. Imprisoned in our new wooden body, we will have to face a journey through enchanted woods and crowded nightclubs to recover the stolen goods from the villain on duty along the path dotted with bizarre characters. After a few hours of play, however, the adventure takes unexpected turns, exactly like Undertale. Even Everhood distorts the sense of story, asking us to make some choices that affect the ending of the plot, leading to different epilogues. The work of Foreign Gnomes is extremely close to that of Toby Fox on a conceptual level, although in a certain sense it also manages to distance itself from it. The adventure is in fact decidedly dreamlike, deliberately out of focus and hermetic. To be fair, the narrative never reaches Undertale's levels, and even getting the best possible epilogue, you never feel a sense of full satisfaction. The story, although sprinkled with interesting breaks in the fourth wall, did not convey the same power that characterizes Fox's work. Nevertheless, the fact of being able to hold a comparison with Undertale is undeniably a plus. And now let's talk about the action in the game. Each fight in Everhood takes place in a 5-lane arena that is openly reminiscent of the interface of titles like Guitar Hero. The attacks of the various opponents will move along these corridors, and Red will not be able to do anything else than try to avoid the incoming blows by dodging and jumping. Although it is simple on paper, this idea is reinvigorated from fight to fight with ever new playful gimmicks. From shots that place a barrier that is impossible to jump over, to effects that deliberately distort the images on the screen and increase the challenge rate. In this regard, considering the amount of colors and flashing lights, Everhood is a production not recommended for those who suffer from epilepsy or are particularly photosensitive. But let me tell you, the fights are just as exciting and memorable than the story itself. Don't believe me? Well, here's a short snippet of me being out of my mind, shouting, peeing myself and enjoying the gameplay while having a blast.
Let's go. Boy. Come on, boy. Holy shit, it's already started. What the fuck? Jesus! Holy crap! Jesus! Alright. We got this.
And there are so many things in this game other than fighting. For example, the reinterpretation of a tennis match on a Super Nintendo, or a kart race that mentions the old cornerstones of the genre. These are small moments that diversify the experience, before the huge amount of questions about the continuation of the plot take over. It is precisely the mysteries of the game, the little truths that never throw a clarifying light on Red's path, that keep the curiosity high. So all in all, Everhood is great. The idea of reinventing the combat system using rhythm game-like mechanics is a winner. And I think each player will be able to find a satisfactory level of challenge for their skills without paying any narrative duty. And on the sound front, those electric beats are just so damn fine. Pick this one.
My lord, what the actual flying fuck is this thing? So the story goes something like your aunt owned a cat cafe on this weird island, but someday midlife crisis hit hard and decided to just sell all the furniture and go travel the world. Apparently the cafe was also full of animals, don't ask what happened to those, other than this one shitty little cat that was just left there. Anywho, after customizing your character's skin purple, you're introduced to the 3 core gameplay elements. 1. Furnish your new cafe. 2. Shrink and throw materials into a bowl to bake stuff for others to buy. And 3. Run around asking NPCs to give you fetch quests. As for me, I couldn't care less for furnishing cafes. While I enjoy cooking, I've always hated baking, and fetch quests crush my soul. I would imagine, at this point, we all know where this review is going, but for the sake of additional detail, let's take a peek at my other annoyances. Every single aspect of the game is boring. Regarding the furnishing and the quests, it's quite self-explanatory really, but even then, it's made worse by having no form of quest indicators, so you either remember the name and location of every NPC in the game, or get ready to enjoy running around looking for them. Furthermore, even the baking part, which at least could be interesting if you could experiment with the ingredients, falls flat as you can only follow given recipes. As for performance, Calico managed to crash twice in 3 hours, and plenty of times the characters cannot handle the texture of the world. Not only does the story start out unreasonable, later on, quest interactions make just as little sense. The music is kind of fun, I guess, but it becomes old quite fast. I believe I completely muted the entire game after an hour or so. I really don't know, man. This is some weird furry subculture shit beyond my comprehension. I'm sure there's a marginal percentile out there that can't hold back their fake ears and tails due to the excitement over this thing, but for everyone else, it's just utter garbage.
Just die already. When I first looked at the game, I was intrigued watching these old folks run amok in an open city and occasionally getting dismembered and decapitated. It looked funny and frantically over the top, and that's exactly what transpired during the first 30 minutes of the game. But unfortunately the novelty wore off pretty quickly and then turned into a painfully frustrating experience. Okay, let's rush through the basics. You choose from 4 characters, and you try to leave the retirement home where you're locked up. After dying 20 times, you finally step out of the door. From there, you're off on a grand adventure as you explore the city that loathes old people. And just like your apartment, almost everything is out to get you. The game is from the team behind Goat Simulator, so if you have played that, you will have a pretty good idea of what to expect here. Almost everything is destructible in one way or another, which ultimately means that you can be killed in a myriad of different ways. Get eaten by a shark? Check. Collision? Check. Sheep? Check. Shelves? Check. At first it is funny that everything can and will kill you, but after 30 minutes it really gets frustrating. Oh, and the bucket list you receive at the beginning of the story has tasks like step on 10 mines and such. So basically the game's objectives are all about dying, which just adds to the frustration factor. Another big problem of mine is the controls. The standard WASD keys are simple enough, but grabbing and ungrabbing objects with Q and E can be tricky. Timing a throw properly is nearly impossible, with much of my success coming down to dumb luck. Couple that with the overly dramatic ragdoll physics and you have a recipe for disaster. So yeah, it wasn't fun for me at all. Maybe it's me, I don't know. But if you like what you see, yeah, why not give it a shot, but for me it was a hard pass.
This is what I expect from a randomized pack of supposedly good games. Paradise Lost is a title I never before heard of, probably would have never otherwise come across, and something that definitely would have been a pity to miss out on. For all intents and purposes, PL is a walking simulator, so if that revolts you, you're out of luck. But if that's the case, you're also doing life wrong and you should probably check out Firewatch. Or this one. There's no action to be had, but none is missed either. While it might seem like a game that would be packed full of jump scares, there's absolutely none of that either, thank God. Instead, there's such a thick atmosphere you could almost bite into it. Gameplay is all about exploring your surroundings and the story. Or stories, I should rather say, as you'll be exploring 3 of those. One of them being an alternative timeline on Earth, where World War II ended in the Nazis just nuking the crap out of Europe. One of them I won't say anything about to not spoil anything, and the third being the story of the protagonist. I won't say anything about this either. Maybe only just that it's a tad bit on the predictable side, unless there's a major twist at the end. This assumed predictability is but one of the flaws present, and while here, we might as well take a look at the others as well. My biggest issue with Paradise Lost is the movement speed, which is just ridiculously slow. Even running is barely noticeably faster than just walking. I get the notion of just not allowing your players to rush through everything, as to quasi force them to take in what you've created, but this is just too much really. Voice acting is also pretty mediocre, it's not at the level of being painful, it's just noticeably poor, especially in comparison to the wonderful music or the graphics. Interaction points require you to stand awkwardly close to them to trigger, and last but not least, the load bug. Roughly 30 minutes in, I came to a point where I saw 2 potential points of progression. I took a turn to the right but became curious, so I reloaded the last checkpoint to see the other path as well. Well, that was a mistake. I got softlock right then and there, no way to get out of there, so I just had to restart the entire level. This sucks. Big time. However, apparently just turning off head bobbing completely negates this issue, so if you do decide to give Paradise Lost a shot, which you should, make sure you turn this off. On the other hand, however, the same situation led me to the realization that your choices here actually do matter. During my second attempt, at the same point I took the left path, and thus completely missed out on the room I entered previously. Similarly, you'll come across a certain mechanic that makes you decide between 2 or 3 options usually, the results of which you'll come across fairly quickly and noticeably. Despite the seemingly sizable con section of this review, I 100% recommend you give Lost Paradise a try. The annoyances are completely overshadowed by the atmosphere the game delivers. It makes you want to go forward and learn more about the events that led to where you are now, and there wasn't a single zone I entered without having this urge to just stop and take in the jaw-dropping scenery. Not every game has to be about dominating something, and Lost Paradise proves this point perfectly well. Sometimes, just experiencing a story is more than enough.
Per Aspera. As we all know, the race is for Mars' own. Elon Musk wants to die there, and several other companies are in for the race. No wonder lately we can see Mars in more and more games, so let's see what 4 Aspera can do for us. The game starts from the terraforming and colonization projects of the Red Planet, but does so with a peculiar approach that distinguishes it from everything that has been proposed previously. Surviving Mars is probably the closest title to Per Aspera in a broad sense, but Per Aspera has several differences. The player impersonates an artificial intelligence whose task is, first, to prepare the colony for arrival of humans, and then to manage the colony together with them. Aluminum mines, iron mines, metal factories, silicon mines, glass factories, it goes on. Then plants that produce mechanical parts, others that produce microchips, followed by maintenance drones. And it is all powered up by solar or wind panels or fission energy. The building and the resource system is very complex, and it is up to the player to make sure that the resources are not lacking. As you play the story mode, you will be assigned objectives such as getting humanity to Mars or looking into an abandoned bunker, and beyond constructing the buildings in the correct location, you will also have to manipulate the priorities that the drones, the transport, the resources will dedicate themselves to. Similarly to surviving Mars, in fact, the gameplay revolves not so much on the production of resources as on the transport of the same between mines, factories and plants. Increasing the number of drones is essential, as is the speed of the tracks on which they move. But setting priorities to these cute electronic transporters is the main tool with which you can cut the time between one mission and another. Obviously, the most important resources are those related to human life: water, food and energy. In case these are scarce, the colonies will return to Earth, and with them your scientific research power as well. In Per Aspera there is also scientific research that allows you to proceed along technological trees that will gradually unlock new buildings, more efficient versions of the same, but also special projects that will allow you to expand your knowledge of the planet and above all, to make it more habitable. And since I'm mentioning the planet itself, while reading after the game it turned out that the devs used the actual geography of Mars, complete with the names of various locations and geographical features. So, very well done, very well done. So as we see, Aspera takes itself quite seriously when it comes to immersing the player in a believable reality. And this is paired with a perfectly crafted speech of a quality we rarely heard. Your alter ego, an AI with a female voice, will converse with human colleagues about emotional nuances, rational reasoning, and safe to say the entire narrative arc and the dialogue is quite on point in my opinion. The game's graphics are another of those aspects that impress me very favorably. We see Mars as probably an AI would see it, so we can see the space defined by its geography and used by resources, and it is framed in an interface rich with information presented in an extremely clear and extremely efficient way, with a very few concessions to the aesthetics. So there are a lot of overlays we can use and utilize when playing the game. All in all, it's a great game. However, there is a downside to it, albeit a marginal one. Around the second hour mark, the game slowed down quite a bit, mostly because of me waiting for the researches to finish. This made me a bit sit back and just look at the screen for a good 5 minutes at times, while I made the game run at 60 times speed. But apart from this nuisance, I've learned a lot about Mars and enjoyed my time with this one quite a lot. So if you liked what you see, I'd suggest picking this one.
Well, the number of games roller coaster is still going strong. This time around we're down to 8. And no, listing a DLC for Borderlands 3 doesn't count as a standalone inclusion. With the new bundle structure, Humble also declared there's not going to be a fixed number of titles moving forward, so let's see where this evolves eventually. Speaking of the new format, there was a little fuck up from their side, failing to include the Aspera keys on release, but they acted on that lightning fast, credit where credit is due. They also decided to spit in the classic plan subs face by charging them in USD, making some extra little pocket money on the back of conversion rates, which actually is a disgusting practice, so if you're on that plan as well, before you pay, just change your settings. Last month I mentioned a new scoring system, that'll have to wait an additional month. We're working on it, but having full-time jobs pretty much limits our capacity. Now, as it pertains for February 2022, this bundle came pretty close to being the best in quite some time. Such a shame it was let down by the handpicked bags of shit called Calico and Just Die, because Everhood and Paradise Lost are some of the best titles included in these bundles to date, and Black Book also proudly stands on top. The remaining 3 titles also have nothing to be ashamed about. In fact, I'm fairly certain many would rate Borderlands up on the top as well. However, for me at least, it doesn't even remotely come close to those 3 up there. This scores as a total 17 points out of the maximum 24, resulting in a monthly performance of 71%, above the yearly average of 2021, and let's keep our fingers crossed we'll keep this trajectory going. As always, we'd be very grateful if you please the machine gods by liking our video. If you'd like to come along for our next one, don't hesitate to subscribe. Any and all recommendations are welcome in the comment section. Give these lesser known titles a shot as well, not only the big ones, and we'll see you again next month.